So as you can see, you guys, all I've been doing when I'm not doing this or when I'm not at work is basically listening to Warhammer Horror Podcast. And to be honest, I'm not sure if it's good for my psyche, if it's good for my mental health, all this grim dark depression that's affecting my head. But you know what? It definitely makes my ride or my commute more interesting. Sometimes I shift the music, but you know what? I want to just get onto it. The Dark Cells and other creepy unsolved mysteries. Warhammer 40k. Hold on, what's going on?
I'm not sure if you were aware or not, but
No.
we're only about 6 months away from the start of spooky season. So
Really
there's
now?
never been a better time like the present to talk about some more of the creepiest unsolved mysteries from the grimdark future of Warhammer 40k. In this video, we're going to talk about a frozen mining planet where
Really?
hundreds of workers mysteriously vanished overnight. The only clue to what happened, a circle of polished skulls, a dying star that, if rumors are to be believed, sings an incredibly disturbing song that lures voidfarers into an early grave by causing all who hear it to go absolutely insane. We're also going to be talking about an underground labyrinthian jail deep beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra, where the darkest and most disturbing entities known to mankind have been locked away. Whatever's down there has got the higher-ups so freaked out that they believe if any of them were to escape, it would bring about the extinction of mankind. We're going to be getting into all that and a whole lot more in this video.
Number 5. The Skull Pit of Lucian's Breath.
Ooh.
The Milky Way galaxy of the 41st millennium has no shortage of creepy and mysterious planets. Yet, out of all of them, none have generated more fear and speculation than the frozen mining world of Lucian's Breath, that many claim is cursed and is harboring a dark and terrible secret. Despite the fact that the planet was originally discovered by rogue trader Sebastian Winterscale in 258 M41, humanity was not the planet's first owners. You see, long before the rise of mankind, the world was inhabited by an unknown Xeno species, who left behind some truly
Unknown?
bizarre...
I mean, more than what we already know. You know what? That makes it more terrifying.
Are ruins that have baffled Imperial scientists for years. Their cities were made out of a very strange substance, the solidified gas-impregnated ice that was common on Lucian's Breath, that, remarkably, is said to be even stronger and more durable than ceramite. Each and every one of these cities was centered around a huge sinkhole filled with bubbling pools of pure nephium, while deep beneath the surface existed a labyrinthian network of tunnels and warrens not of natural origin. It is believed that they were carved out using such advanced machinery that there's no indication anywhere along their length of any actual tool being used. To this day, we still know.
So, it's like an episode of Ancient Aliens. Did Xenos create and carve a path in this particular world to make buildings? Find out. Hold on. Old again.
And proportionate proxy.
Know very little about the ancients of Lucian's Breath. We don't know who they were, what they wanted, or why they seemingly disappeared without leaving behind any trace of their existence
So just
other
like
than their
the
cold and
Aztecs.
forgotten cities of glass. The planet is incredibly hostile to human existence, sporting both an atmosphere that is so thin it's basically useless,
Because why wouldn't they be?
and air that is said to be so frigidly cold that if one was to attempt to breathe it without a specially designed rebreather, their lungs might very well freeze before they suffocated. Despite its hostile nature,
catch
though,
on fire.
Lucian's Breath attracts a wide array of rogue traders, pirates, raiders, and more, all seeking to lay claim to its nephium deposits, which is a highly flammable substance that has a number of unusual properties and is highly coveted
Because why not, right?
by the Adeptus Mechanicus. For centuries, rumors have circulated throughout tavern bars across the Calexis sector that Lucian's Breath is a cursed world. There have been numerous documented
it is.
accounts from workers that managed to complete a contract here that spoke of strange, writhing shadows that could be seen moving within the glassy walls of the crumbling Xenos ruins. Some say these shadows are vaguely humanoid in appearance, undulating and writhing with malevolent sentience, whereas others said they resembled something altogether
I wonder what does that mean, malevolent sentience.
more alien and terrifying, with no discernible human attributes at all. What these things are or why they are appearing is still unknown, as the rogue traders seem to only care about their quotas being met. From their perspective, such talk is nothing more than an ill-gotten attempt to scare away prospectors from a rich cache of Nephium. However, recently rumors have begun.
That's actually quite real, because during the age of pirates in the Caribbean, it was the pirates were known to actually propagate their own stories, propagate their own legends. Who doesn't like hearing stuff about themselves? But of course, it was also meant to scare away the military, or basically to scare away almost everyone that's not supposed to be there. The victims propagated themselves, the pirates propagated themselves, and then of course sailors love to talk, or they're actually quite known for it. So yeah, there's the possibility of the stories were just there to scare away rival prospectors.
Circulating that the camps controlled by rogue trader Auspice Corda have had workers seemingly vanish into thin air, leaving behind no sign of their passing or any evidence to what happened to them. The most infamous and mysterious example of this phenomena can be traced back to an area the locals refer to as the Skull Pit, an insulated mining camp once home to over 300 indentured servants, convicts, and captured raiders turned miners. Everything seemed to be going to plan, and by all accounts, the camp had been incredibly
I think this one came from Frostpunk.
Successful with only a few minor setbacks. That was all until the year 814 M41, when all communication with the camp suddenly ceased. Numerous attempts were made to re-establish contact, believing that recent ice storms had caused some kind of Vox system malfunction. However, no matter how many times they tried, the only thing playing back over the Vox waves was cold, dead static. Eventually, a tech crew was dispatched to investigate, and what they found only left them with more questions. The entire facility was empty of workers, yet all evidence pointed to a seemingly normal day. There was half-eaten food still on the table, bunks that looked recently slept in, and the—
Can someone please put it down in the comments? What was the name of that ship? Was it the Mary Celeste? The name of that ship is historically from history quite well known. Croatoan Mary Celeste. Basically, it doesn't only happen IRL to ships, but also to actual settlements. Croatoan Mary Celeste. I'm not sure about the name, the Mary Celeste, but I think it was the Mary Celeste. But comments, please. This kind of abandonment does happen in real life.
miners' protective gear was all still in their lockers and accounted for. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air, as attempting to leave the facility without this gear would have surely been a death sentence. The rescue team would continue their search and eventually came across a lone survivor, a man named Valsetto Hain, who had been a former raider commander that, upon his capture, agreed to work the mines in exchange for his life. By the time the rescuers found him, however, he had been reduced to a gibbering wreck, mumbling the same phrase over and over, touch the pool, as he stared wide-eyed off into the distance at an unseen specter. Despite the slim chance that any of the miners would have survived outside of the camp, the team decided to search the surrounding area. When they checked the Nephium sinkhole that the camp was built around, they found a truly disturbing scene. Polished white skulls had been arranged around the entire perimeter of the sinkhole, each and every one of them—
Note, polished white skulls. Are skulls supposed to be white? I mean, I've seen bones before, but it seems like it was treated for stuff after it went through chemical treatment, but I've never seen raw bones before. Well, I've seen raw bones before. I had a teammate whose tibia was it? No, the arm bone went out of his arm. But the thing is, it was fresh, it was fleshy. So if you cook, it looked the same way as if from a freshly butchered pork chop or something, or a T-bone steak. It simply looked like that. But I've never seen raw bones actually, left out in the wild, and to see just, how it looks like. If it's, white. But in this particular case, it's polished skulls.
Turned outwards so the empty eye sockets could stare back at any who attempted to approach. And creepily enough, the number of skulls in the ring added up precisely with the number of missing miners, with the exception of one being unaccounted for. Sometime later, the rescue team would give their official report.
So it wasn't a mystery. They know what happened to the people. The people really, they got killed. No, the real mystery now is what happened to them. Right? We know where they are, mystery solved, but the question is, who or what did it?
and would state that Falsetto had gone crazy and murdered his crewmates one by
Possibly.
one, that he alone had been responsible for the disappearance, and thus he was executed for his crimes. It was simply an open and shut case of madness derived from isolation and prolonged exposure to hazardous working conditions. But something just wasn't adding up. To this day, there have been no official attempts to reclaim the sinkhole or even remove the skulls, despite the fact that for all
Because
intents
why
and
would
purposes,
they?
the mine is still fully functional and it's
I mean, the captain or the survivor was a suspect of convenience.
continued operation would be incredibly lucrative. The rogue traders that compete over this world are absolute cutthroats that don't exactly value human life and whose moral compasses seem to only function when it's convenient for them. So what is it about the skull pit that is scaring them off? Is it possible that some unspeakable evil was encountered by the original rescue team and was conveniently left out of their report? We still don't have definitive answers, and thus the skull pit of Lucien's breath remains one of 40k's creepiest mysteries. Number 4. The dark cells beneath the Imperial Palace.
Here's the thing. Usually when I let the podcast run, or when I let the audiobooks run, I usually don't know who or what is playing. It's not like they introduce myself from the book, blah 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 blah. But here's the thing: I've known 2 stories. I've heard at least 2 stories about the Adeptus Custodes. One who actually met the Emperor, that the Emperor is still alive under the sanctum, under the throne. And apparently, he's half Emperor and half chaos thing now. He's half Emperor, half monster now, like split down the middle. Because in order to keep things running, he has to be part of the void somehow. So I can't remember if it was part of the book or if it was part of a fan-made story or something, or a fan-made fiction. Can someone please put it down in the comments? Because they're like podcasts or AI voiced stories about 40k. It's like a dime a dozen on YouTube. So can someone please if that came from an actual published or canon books about the emperor being half still half emperor and half chaos, is it kosher? Is it actually part of canon, or was it just some sort of fan-made fiction? So comments please. Because the dark cells, I've been hearing a lot of stories about them, especially about the Custodes, about the guy that, I mean, one other story about this particular Custodes was meant to basically remember. He was supposed to serve as the emperor's memory. That's why he must live on or something. So here's the thing, right? I just let the podcast run. Sometimes I pay attention, sometimes I don't because I'm too busy driving, or sometimes I'm too busy thinking about work. So I honestly can't tell if half of the stories that I've been hearing on the podcasts are real, or in the audiobook is, real or canon or actually sanctioned by GW. So again, comments please.
For many years now, the dark cells beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra have been a source of nearly endless speculation. You can think of them as a massive prison complex that exists deep beneath the earth and is said to hold horrors so unspeakable that humanity would not survive their release. Because of just how dangerous these prisoners are said to be, an entire host of custodian guard, known as the Shadowkeepers, is deployed here at all times to watch over them. The dark cells are perhaps the most secured and tightly guarded location in the entirety of the galaxy, next to, say, the Golden Throne itself. They are barricaded by both runic locks and sanctic warding circles, and are so completely and utterly secured that, in a figurative sense, it is as if they are outside of the bounds of time and space. This place is said to be incredibly unnerving to exist in, as nothing, not even light or sound, will escape from its forbidden cells. The air here is so saturated in an ever-present feeling of inescapable dread that it causes the shadows themselves to squirm and crawl. Even the custodians, who are like superhuman versions of the Astartes, are said to always be on edge here. To exist in this place is to constantly be bombarded by a feeling of profound emptiness that would drive lesser men to madness in mere moments. Yet many of these custodians will stand guard, existing in this terrible place for decades at a time. Speculation about what could be lurking within the dark cells has run wild on the internet for quite some time. Some people believe there could be a clone of the Emperor down there. There could be a master
Yeah, I've heard of that one, clone of the Emperor, whatever.
STC, an intact Catan, one of the old ones, the 2 missing Primarchs, the Men of Iron, a lesser deity, the list just goes on and on. However, unfortunately,
there's a lot of fanfics involved too.
Just really isn't a lot to go off of with this place in the lore. Whatever's down there is normally just described as an unspeakable horror in one instance, or the quote-unquote last terrors of old night in another. That being said, we can make a few educated guesses. Now, whatever's down there has to meet a few different criteria. It has to be deemed too dangerous to be allowed to exist uncontained, yet simultaneously too valuable to mankind's continued existence to completely destroy. Or conversely, it has to be something so powerful that mankind physically can't destroy it with the technology that's currently at our disposal. And to me, this rules out anything demon related, as normally killing a demon will only send them screaming back into the warp where they will eventually be remade. But we do know that there are some weapons that are capable of permanently killing.
That was a story that I heard, that the emperor is down somewhere beneath the throne, half warp, half Primarch or something. So again, I didn't pay any attention to the titles, okay? I just let the podcast and the audiobook run.
A demon, such as the Emperor's Sword.
I should really turn off that YouTube autoplay thing.
That is now wielded by Guilliman. So from my perspective, if the Dark Cells were just harboring a bunch of super powerful demons, he could just go down there with his flaming sword and poke a whole bunch of them, make a solid afternoon out of it. Now, despite how secure the Dark Cells may seem to be, they are not completely impenetrable, as the 8th edition Custodian Codex tells us that shortly after the formation of the Great Rift, it was said that several of the jail cells were discovered to be empty, their occupants having been spirited away by unknown means. This has led the Shadowkeepers to occasionally be deployed on missions of reclamation whenever the location of a former prisoner has been discovered. One such Shadowkeeper was named Jeharl Feldoris Gao, and he had been deployed on a mission to track down and slay an entity known as the Slithering Dreamer. A grim achievement to be sure, but one that, once again, we're given very little insight into other than its name. So yeah, unfortunately the vaults beneath Terra.
The Slithering Dreamer? Interesting.
Although being an incredibly spooky and creepy mystery that people love to speculate on, we just don't really know enough about this place yet. So your guess is as good as mine when it comes to figuring out what's actually in there. Let me know in the comment section what you think is locked away in this place.
Comments,
Personally, I hope this is an area of the lore that Games Workshop decides to expand upon in the future, but at the same time, from the Imperium's perspective, perhaps some knowledge is just best left forgotten. Number 3. The Siren Star. As is the case with many of 40k's creepiest unsolved mysteries, the next one I want to talk about begins with an unexplained disappearance. But this time, it wasn't just a group of colonists who pushed too far into uncharted territory, or a bunch of convicts turned miners on a frigid ice world that went missing. This disappearance was that of a famous rogue trader named Graydon, as well as the entirety of her fleet, who vanished without a trace somewhere in the Heathen Stars region of the galaxy. Although it's never exactly
an entire fleet disappeared. I mean, bad things happened in the warp, and it isn't far off that there would be multiple Geller field failures, navigators suddenly dropping dead. These things happened.
Been confirmed what happened to them. A few years back, a lot of deranged voidsmen that claimed to be the sole survivors of the rogue trader's capital ship, Avarice, began turning up in both Port Wander and Footfall. Whether or not these men were telling the truth has never been confirmed, but the tales they spun were equal parts fascinating and deeply disturbing. They spoke of a song sung by a lonely star that wept for the death of her beloved children, a song as melancholic as it was beautiful.
A song sung by a lonely star. Interesting.
And irresistible. A song that spoke of riches beyond their wildest dreams and everything their heart could possibly desire. So bewitched they were by the song's promises that they were unable to react quickly enough when a violent warp storm suddenly appeared out of nowhere and smashed the fleet apart against a nearby asteroid field. As these men were common voidsmen, none of them could properly articulate what exactly happened to them, how they managed to be shipwrecked, how they survived, or what exactly it was they encountered. At first, these were nothing more than rumors, but as they started
multiple Geller field failure, navigator dropping dead on several ships. Not exactly an uncommon story.
Circulating over and over, they quickly became cemented as legend. And then as the years rolled on, similar reports from equally mad men and women started popping up all across the Coronis expanse. Each and every account was different.
I think I'm doing that again. Like, every time I encounter something paranormal or I hear of a paranormal story, I almost always do that thing where I try to come up with a logical explanation.
And strangely enough, many of them claim to have emanated from different regions of the expanse, but they all spoke of an irresistible melody that echoed across every frequency, a siren's call that caused even the most seasoned spacefaring veterans to be gripped by an irreparable madness. Those who were afflicted threw all caution to the wind and headed straight into the heart of a nearby system in search of the song's origin. Some more experienced captains were said to have given compelling arguments why their course needed to be altered despite the protests of their crew, whereas others were driven into a deep insanity that caused them to murderously lash out at any that would dare stand in their way. There were even a few that were said to be so far gone that they threw themselves out of their own airlocks in order to get closer to their celestial muse. If the rumors are to be believed, it's said that only those that managed to overcome this song's grip and flee before laying eyes upon this siren star, as it has come to be known, were able to escape with their lives, as all who have ever seen it have been lost to the void. So what exactly is going on here? Is there any truth to these stories, or is it simply a case of sailors' tales that have taken on a life of their own? Well, as is often the case with legends, very few details about the rumored Siren Star are correct, and whatever truth can actually be gleaned from these accounts creates even more questions than answers. The Imperial records state that within the Heathen Stars region of the galaxy, not far from the baleful light of the Rifts of Hecaton, is
Delectus Nox, Fanal Echoes, Vaporeus, Niduish, Rakata, Zyth, Seven Dooms, and Agusia.
a little-known and abandoned system that was charted millennia ago by an unnamed surveyor. Now, although some of these ancient reports have more information than others, this one stands out as being particularly bare bones. The individual labeled the system as Diva Serenium and simply stated the type and size of its star, as well as its number of planets and known navigational hazards. The only thing that actually really stands out, aside from the lack of information itself, is a note stating celestial anomaly in reference to the star. The system is long dead, scoured of all life by some celestial disaster that occurred potentially millions of years before its discovery. The star at its center is a dim white dwarf that doesn't have a lot of time left before it completely burns out. It languishes in the center of the system, struggling to cast its weak, guttering light to the outer planets that have all frozen over. The only evidence that suggests that these planets ever supported life is a small handful of dead artificial satellites of non-human origin that float aimlessly around the outer planet.
I wonder what the Ordo Xenos have to say about these unknown origins.
However, the strangest thing about this system is also surely what its original discoverer meant by celestial phenomena. Emanating from the system's dying star can be heard a sharp keening wail. It is a jumble of frequencies.
A sharp, keening wail? So, fucking hell. I loved how to interpretations about sounds and visuals
that can be picked up on nearly every wireless communication system that drives men to distraction or madness and compels them towards the center of the system and into the star's eldritch embrace. Whatever is causing the star to sing and broadcast its song to passing ships still remains a mystery. Some Imperial scholars believe that it is simply an unknown natural phenomena, whereas members of the Inquisition have stated that it may be some form of demon or an ancient Xenos technology. Although we don't have any definitive answers on what exactly is going on here, I'm gonna be honest with you. This was one of the most depressing things I've ever researched when looking into 40k's creepy mysteries. Something about this lonely, dying star that is surrounded by the remnants of a long-dead civilization that long ago depended upon it for life.
Something needs to die. I mean, there's a reason why it's dying or dead. Alright? Some things are better left unknown or undiscovered or, well, it's better off dead.
Life just really resonated with me. Now, I'll admit, this is just my own personal depressing headcanon, but I don't think this thing is malicious in nature. I think this star is in mourning. unable to accept the death of its children, both the planets that orbited it and the untold billions of organisms that it once gave life to. Its song calls out to any that will listen, not because it wishes to draw them into an early grave, but
I mean, one of the most terrifying things about this particular series is that it shows that there are worse things than the Imperium, than the Empire itself.
maybe simply because it's lonely and knows that it won't be around much longer. To me, the star is like a loving, grieving elder who has lost everyone that she ever cared for and simply doesn't want to be alone when she dies. Number 2. The Year of Ghosts. Do you remember how earlier in this video, when we spoke on the Vaults of Terra, how it was one of 40k's greatest mysteries, but we just didn't have a lot of information to go off of? Well, the next thing that we're going to talk about takes that to an entirely different level, as it's probably the most vague and cryptic thing that I've ever spoken about on this channel. This so-called Year of Ghosts has only ever been mentioned in a single location, and we as the audience are only given a single sentence to
Year of Ghosts?
account for a supposedly incredibly pivotal event in the 40k timeline. The source of this little mystery comes from the 5th edition 40k core rulebook on page 124, where it simply states that in the year of 831 of the 33rd millennium, the honored dead rose up to defeat the terrors of
Lord of the Rings. Hold on. The Rings. Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. Hold on. Wait, yeah, got it. Oh, wait, hold on. So, Lord of the Rings, the White Mountains, the Oathbreakers, the one who showed up in the story. So, are we looking at a similar story here? Remember, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, they went into the cave where it was filled with a bunch of ghosts, and Aragorn had to show his sword, that he is the true king, he is the true heir of Gondor, and then the ghosts decided to fight for him. Are we looking at the same story? Are we looking at the similar story right here and right now? Can someone please put it down in the comments? Because the Year of the Ghosts, because those were ghosts, and they fought for the true king of Gondor, Aragorn. So, comments please.
the warp. Now, I don't know about you, but as a big fan of all things spooky, and in particular spooky ghosts, this little passage had my imagination going absolutely crazy. I played dinosaurs and ghosts over an Age of Sigmar, and for the briefest of moments, I pictured in my head my Night Haunt army on a galactic scale, rising up in their trillions to fight against a demonic incursion. And as badass as that sounds, it's probably not what happened. Ghosts are a well-documented phenomena within the grimdark future, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. But when we're specifically talking about the forces of humanity, and more specifically, ghosts that would seek to defend their living descendants, for a lot of people, the first thing that's going to
Day of the Dead, Mexico.
come to mind is the Legion of the Damned. And don't get me wrong, they certainly fit the bill here, as the most commonly accepted theory to what they actually are is the vengeful spirits of slain space marines given new purpose by the God Emperor. However, the timeline doesn't exactly line up, as their first documented sighting wouldn't be for around another 6,000 years at the beginning of the 40th millennium. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the theory that they are ghosts of slain space marines, although being generally accepted by the Warhammer community, is A, not confirmed, and B, even if it is true, is not known to the Imperium. It certainly wouldn't be known by any historian or lowly
So in other words, it's unrecorded. So if unrecorded, we can't accept it as canon.
Scribe that was cataloging the Imperium's history. Personally, I think that it was something else, something that had a lot more impact, as this entry is listed alongside some other incredibly pivotal events in the timeline, such as the Horus Heresy, the Scouring, the Rise of the Beast, and the Howling. Games Workshop, and more importantly the Black Library, is notorious for leaving little seeds of information like this throughout their text, quick little references to crazy over-the-top events that they don't bother explaining. And then years down the line, when they're looking for the subject of a new novel or campaign, they can reach back and pick up one of those little seeds and expand on them. I'm pretty confident that that's what's happening here. And Games Workshop, if you're listening to this has got to be at the top of my list of things I want you to expand on. How are you going to sit there and tell me that there was potentially a galaxy-wide uprising of ghosts that went to war against demons, and you're not even going to bother giving me any extra details about it at all? Nothing? Unforgivable. So yeah, that was the year of ghosts. We don't know anything about it, but it probably was something pretty crazy. And hopefully we'll find out more about it in the future. Number 1. The Watchers in the Dark. So I'll freely admit that I'm not the biggest Dark Angels lore buff. I skipped over their arc in the Horus Heresy as, quite frankly, it was boring as shit, especially compared to what came before it. How are you gonna go from the high of the drop site massacre to a bunch of kids running around in the woods of Caliban? Not saying it was a bad book, but it was a jarring change of pace. Anyways, one element of the chapter that has always really struck me as deeply creepy and mysterious is the tiny and somewhat adorable entities known as the Watchers in the Dark. They appear as small robed figures that rarely ever speak and whose true nature and origins remain unknown. Some within the Imperium believe that they are revered by the Dark Angels, and maybe that's true for a couple of them, but to say that the Dark Angels are not fond of aliens, mutants, or warp entities is a pretty huge understatement. So there's definitely something else going on here. These little guys have a long
So the question is, they're human in origin or something?
and sordid connection to the chapter's history, its ancient secrets, and specifically their Primarch Lionel Johnson, as before his reawakening, it was said that it was the Watchers in the Dark that exclusively watched over his sleeping body. Although they appear as cute little Jawa guys that simply want to help out their Space Marine buddies, this is nothing more than a facade, an intentionally humble illusion that belies their true nature as an unknowable cosmic horror. The truth is that their tiny physical form is only the smallest sliver of what they actually are, the only portion of them that the human
So a mere avatar, a mere representation.
mind is capable of perceiving. It is as if we are a bunch of fish staring at a giant's finger that has pierced the watery surface of our realm, and we're incapable of even comprehending
Interesting.
the rest of the digit's owner. They are said to exist outside of time and space, and are everywhere and nowhere all at once. Although genuine interactions with them are relatively rare, we do have a few examples of them speaking, and in one, they claim to have helped shape humanity and guide the species for over 15,000 years, which from their perspective is no great.
Hold up. They remind me, was it 2? I think it was the second Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2. What was the name of those robot thingies that Mass Effect 2 embassy robots? Bots. Robot spiders. Wait. What was the name of that? Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2. Spiders. Mission. There was even a quest to it where you're supposed to basically lock in the maintenance robots running around in Mass Effect 2. Are they the same thing? They could be the same thing. That they're waiting for the Leviathan, they're waiting for the Sovereign to attack, and then they do the cycle all over again. Can someone please put it down in the comments? I forgot the name. Anyways, comments please. I have to remember the name of those robots.
Greater or lesser a span of time than any other. In fact, it was revealed in the novel Dreadwing that they do not see time as linear, and by their own word, it's more of a mosaic. It is three-dimensional and beautiful. Despite their remarkable
Interesting.
abilities, they claim that time cannot be viewed as a complete image, no matter how many trained eyes fixate on it. Instead, every single detail and facet of a
I mean, if you think about it, time is relative. Einstein theory.
timeline needs to be viewed in isolation and judged on its own merits. To this end, they foresaw the destruction of Caliban and welcomed it as an event that needed to occur for chaos to eventually be defeated. What I find so
See,
particular
again, those spider thingies that running around the embassy in Mass Effect 2, were they a thing? That you're just, simply waiting for the end of that particular station?
Purely creepy about them is that they are this unknowable cosmic entity that clearly possesses an enormous power, yet they present themselves as
Something.
tiny, humble servants. If you'll excuse
Why?
the cliche analogy, it reads to me like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Except instead of a sheep, it's a cute little guy in green robes, and instead of a wolf, it's an eldritch abomination outside the realm of human comprehension. To further illustrate just how creepy these little guys actually are, I want to share with you a quick passage from the short story Fate Unbound, where in the Changeling, a notably powerful demon of Tzeentch encountered one of them while attempting to infiltrate the Rock, the cathedral monastery of the Dark Angels. Now, a quick note, demons are not normally
course.
noted for feeling the emotion of fear, and on the rare few occasions where we have seen demons get scared, it's normally in the presence of a godlike entity like the Emperor or at least one of his Primarch sons. And even then, it's less that they're afraid of what they're fighting against and more the fear of failure that will result in punishment from their associated deity. But when the Changeling came face to face with a Watcher in the Dark that day, its presence chilled it to the core. A shudder, a rare sensation, ran down the Changeling's borrowed spine, the shadow of an instinctive reaction born from its time wearing mortal flesh. Skin prickled and the servos and the illusion of its power armor whirred as its fist clenched. Around it, for the first time since it had set events in motion, fate buckled. There was something at the far end of the cell corridor. The Changeling could not so much as see it as sense the absence of the ether around it. To the demon's warp sight, the thing was really
So it's like a blank.
an unthing, a black void without tangible thoughts or emotions
So
to
blank.
define it. The demon tried
Similar to a blank.
to look upon the unthing with Azrael's flesh eyes. It was diminutive in size, its form hidden beneath thick folds of bone-colored cloak, as though in imitation of the lion's sons. The shadows beneath its deep cowl were utterly impenetrable, as dark to mortal eyes as its soul presence was to the Changeling's warp vision. It did not move, it did not have to. The Changeling found itself taking a step back, the demon's flesh quivering. Fear was something the Changeling could not feel, only feed upon, but the sight of the unthing watching
Notice that, how he describes this thing. An unthing.
him from the shadows caused the demon an indefinable, icy discomfort. The Changeling could not stay here. It could go no further. This part of the wider plan was unnecessary anyway, a mere addendum to the ritual that would carry the demonic trickster away and drag the lions with it. The Changeling doubled back the way it had come, the cells untouched, fate's weave morphed, the future a newborn, fresh entity. Behind it, the Watcher in the Dark remained silent and unmoving. It was still there, unseen, when back within the Angel Acasta's depths, the lion, the wolf, knight, and angel hunter finally caught the Changeling at bay. Perhaps we will never know exactly what the Watchers in the Dark actually are, but for humanity's
Interesting,
sake,
though.
hopefully their intentions remain benevolent. And that was 5 of Warhammer 40k's creepiest unsolved mysteries. Which one do you think was the creepiest and why? What do you think the Watchers in the Dark actually are? Are they demons, aliens, or something altogether more horrifyingly
We're definitely going to explore the dark cells beneath there from all the audiobooks and podcasts I've read.
unknown?
No,
What do you think
I've-
is lurking in the
wait, I've
shadowy
listened
vaults
to.
beneath the Imperial Palace? And what about that siren star? Is it actually as depressing as I think it is, or am I just reading way too much into it? Let me
Way
know
too
all of your
much into
thoughts,
it.
comments, corrections, and suggestions for future videos down in the comment section below. As you all know, I read just about every single one of them and try to respond to as many of them as I can. Let me know if you know of any other creepy 40k mysteries that you'd love to hear me talk about. Oh yeah, and if you like content like this, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I know YouTubers say it all the time, but it really does help
Please
out.
do.
Anyways, with all that said, big thanks to everyone who supports the work that I do, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.
We've taken more breaks and we actually seen the story, but you know what? Let's just go for it. All right, here we go. See if we like it.
In the grimdark future of the 41st millennium, libraries are not the quiet, comforting sanctuaries we might imagine. They are labyrinths of ink and paper, endless
I
catacombs.
mean, of course, they're not. Have you ever been stuck in the library at like 9 in the evening? They're downright creepy. I remember there was this one dude. Right? Because they usually I don't know what happened to him, but the thing is, he was pooping in the library bathroom, and the thing is, the person or the custodian responsible for turning off the lights didn't bother, and the thing is, didn't bother to check if people were inside the bathroom, and the problem is he left his cell phone on the desk. Because we were all studying for that night. He left his phone on the desk. So he went to the bathroom. It was some sort of an emergency situation. So he went directly to the bathroom. All he had was tissue paper. And the thing is, the custodian responsible for turning off the lights for the night, didn't bother to check if people were inside the bathroom. The light switch was in the hallway. He just turned it off and then walked away. And he screamed. It's like, we couldn't hear him because it was outside in the hall and we were all in the inner part. And the thing is, no one was there. It's like he was shouting for like half an hour to someone please help him out. Because he couldn't move and he couldn't wipe properly and he was worried that he was going to smear shit all over his pants if he tried to move. So he was screaming for help for like half an hour in in complete darkness. It was only when one of the guards that was doing his round heard him that he was actually rescued. But anyways, yeah, libraries, especially in schools, historic schools, or schools that have been around for like a couple of 100 years, not a good place to stay in at night.
Of shelves that stretch far beyond the memory of their keepers. Many contain stacks that seem to stretch onwards and upwards for miles on end, while others contain literal mountains of wax formed from the countless candles that light their hollowed halls.
Of course.
Many have grown so monolithic over the millennia that trying to map them out has become an impossible task. None truly know just how deep they go or what horrors have taken up residence within their forgotten sectors. There are some that believe,
Just imagine trying to maintain something like this.
thousands of years ago,
Moisture is definitely going to be your enemy and leak.
knowledge was once freely accessible in these places. Whether or not such tales are to be believed,
No,
the
they're
Imperium of Man knows the truth. Knowledge is a weapon more dangerous than any other.
Of course
to the
it is.
wardens who guard it, their vigil is seen as both a sacred duty and a curse. Every scroll, record, and volume contains a weight that few can bear. Some contain prescribed truths, others heretical conjecture, while others things far worse.
Heretical
Tonight's
conjecture.
tale is titled The Stacks, written by Chris Winterton and included in the Warhammer horror anthology The Resting Places, released in 2022. If you appreciate these stories, then I encourage you to support the original release, as this is only
Definitely gonna check them out because I truly enjoy these things, these audio books, on the way to work.
one of the 13 spine-chilling tales included in this collection. As always, a link to pick up a digital copy for yourself is
Here's the thing. I know this is heresy, but I truly find these stories way more interesting and better than Dan Abnett's initial work for the Horus Heresy. Horus Rising, False Gods was a completely different author, but I definitely find these stories way better than the actual lore stories related to 40k.
provided in the description down below. Our story follows Archivist Praefectus Livia
Archivist.
Tyrio, a woman both sworn to silence and burdened with a seemingly impossible task. The Emperor's Holy Inquisition has come to the library, and they're demanding a tome hidden deep within the restricted section. This is no simple
The thing is, would she know? And how would she know? Well, technically, as the head archivist, she's supposed to know, but the thing is, when you take over the job, you still have to basically learn everything again.
quest, for when the Inquisition issues a command, failure is a death sentence. Many teams of archivists have already been dispatched into the library's depths, yet none have returned. Time is running out, and Livia
So ask for an escort then.
now the last remaining archivist and the library's only hope of salvation, must brave the darkness and venture forth with nothing but a candle to light her way. Yet among the endless corridors and cages, the books here do not rest quietly. Some whisper secrets in dead tongues, some bleed like open wounds, and some claw at the mind, demanding not only to be read, but to be entirely consumed. Livia will learn that ink can stain more deeply than blood, and not every light in the darkness is marking the way home. Tonight, my friends, the gates of the library's restricted section are opening just for you. So gather round and listen well as we dive into another tale of madness and horror in the Grimdark Story Hour. Archivist Prefectus Livia Tirio ground the heel of her hand into her eye socket, as though to drive wakefulness through her optic.
Ground the heel of her hand to her eye socket. Alright, so she's rubbing her eyes with her palms. Okay. The heel of her hand. Alright, so basically I do it with this side of my index. I usually rub my eyes by the side of my index finger. You guys do that. You try to emanate or you try to follow the instructions. She ground the heel of her hand to her eye socket. Alright, got it. She was rubbing her eyes with the heel of her palm. That was it.
Nerve and into her brain. Flashes of shifting colored shapes writhe through the darkness behind her eyelid. She had snatched only a handful of hours of sleep since the library had received the Inquisition's demand. She stretched hard enough to crack her spine, though the ache in her...
God damn it. Oh, shit. Hold on. Crap. I dropped something. Okay. Oh, crap. Where is it? We're good. We're back. There we go. Alright. She's the last archivist. She was rubbing her eyes. And we're good to go. Alright, go.
Her shoulders remained unyielding and continued her search of the overstuffed shelves that lined the room, a servo skull tracking along them with her. They bulged with old books and fragile scrolls, sagging under the weight of the text written by Livia's predecessors in their attempt to document the library's contents. Livia had ransacked it all in search of any...
I've always wondered about why the theme, like, servo skulls everywhere. It just dawned on me. Can you please feel free to correct me if I'm right? The reason for this is that we're not allowed AI, we're not allowed thinking machines, or we're not allowed advanced machines. So therefore, servo skulls, they'd rather use their brain and meld it into a machine. So at least some thought processes can be left at least enough to actually do its job. Am I correct? Is that the function of servo skulls, that whatever it is that servo skull was made for, what it would do is simply it would be limited to do that function that it was made for, instead of AI or something or a thinking machine.
Indication of the location of the tome the Holy Ordos demanded. Acidic ink had long since burnt the meaning out of the earliest, turning the pages to brittle fretwork. The later accounts were filled with errors and omissions, keyed to reference systems long since abandoned. Countless hours of work had narrowed the tome's whereabouts down to the restricted section. But even that was a vast expanse. She dispatched the news to the searching archivist and continued her work in an attempt to truly pinpoint the tome's location. Activity serving as a bulwark against fevered panic. She pulled a map from the shelves, unrolling the frail parchment on her desk atop the discarded books and charts already splayed across it. The malformed topography spread fresh cracks through the brittle paper. Her own doomed attempts at cartography made up the lowest strata of the accretion of falsehoods on her desk.
Of course.
Every document in the Prefectus's office was misleading to some greater or lesser degree. The library's contents growing too fast, within a structure too vast.
I mean, at this point, either if there's a secret like that, if the archive is trying to keep a secret like that, it would be logical to make the records as confusing as possible. It would be only logical to keep it as secretive as possible, to make it as confusing as possible, so people wouldn't be able to follow the trail or wouldn't be able to follow the map. Either that or her first assumption is correct, that the archives expanded to such an extent that those who are trying to make a map out of it, or those who are trying to make a topographical map out of it, a chronological map out of the whole thing, simply couldn't keep up. Ergo, it ends in confusion. But I think in this particular line, the best part, or whoever set up this archive made it confusing in a sense that so people wouldn't be able to follow it, since you know what, they're trying to keep a secret, or they're trying to basically keep this book secret, this tome that the Inquisition is looking for.
Has to be memorized. The
Yeah.
already considerable area enclosed within the footprint of the library's walls multiplied many times over by the labyrinth of shelves that folded upon themselves in a geometric maze.
Of course.
The latest map showed the library's main expanse in eye-watering detail. Once she'd oriented herself, Livia skimmed over the intricate network of lines, the ragged nail of a trailing finger covering in seconds what it would take hours to accomplish on foot. The servo skull hovering at her shoulder felt more like a critic than a companion, the eyes of the librarian Majoris watching her progress. She looked to the restricted section. Here,
I mean, imagine that nightmare, your boss literally looking over your shoulder using a servo skull. Holy crap, it would drive me nuts. I would take a bat to that servo skull.
the shelves didn't continue on in their angular runs, but were confined to small squares, representing the cages the books there were held within, the contents proscribed. Her finger began to flick between the reference numbers within each inked box, and at last she found the code she sought, fingertip grinding into the parchment. She checked her notes once again, unnecessarily, for the Inquisition's diktat was seared in her mind. The tome they requested identified by a string of characters. The reference on the map matched it exactly. Livia's relief was but momentary. Finding the location on the map was a minor and uncertain victory, hope lying only in its presumed accuracy. She wasted no time in savoring her fragile triumph, making a hastily sketched copy of the map section in her notebook and running from the cell, the servo skull matching her pace. Livia had lost any track of time as she worked, but knew that many days had elapsed since she'd left the entrance hall. Still reeling from the arrival of the Inquisition's request,
Of course.
the Archivist Majoris had summoned all the archivists that
I can't remember if this Inquisitor, this particular Inquisitor came from a video game, right?
could be spared, and dispatched a team into the depths to locate the tome.
Of course.
They'd not returned, nor had the
This
two
Inquisitor.
that followed them. Livia had stopped watching their departures then, leaving others to stand vigil. The glow from the hall seeped into the corridor, but even forewarned,
I'm sorry, can someone please put it down in the comments, the name of this particular Inquisitor? I saw him in a video game trailer. We have a trailer about him. Or at least, featuring him regarding the Inquisition.
Livia had to shield her eyes from the profusion of candles crowded upon the shrine of the lost, one for every soul consumed by the depths. The library was burning lives to find what the Inquisition sought. Despite the heat rolling off the shrine, Livia couldn't help but shudder. She made a swift obeisance before it. The wingtips of the Aquila she made turned tattered by her chewed nails. A warden made his way towards her across the deserted chamber, dark robes clenched tight about him. Behind him, Livia could see the Inquisition's request displayed upon the gates that barred the entrance to the library proper. Within the thrice-barred eye of the heavy seal at the bottom of the scroll, a skull regarded her with a baleful gaze.
Archivist Praefectus.
Barely more than a whisper in the non-hollow space, the warden's voice reached Livia's ears clearly.
The Majoris has gone to prepare. The Inquisition are sending an emissary for the tome. Their acolyte will leave with it, even if it means venturing into the library to rip it from the shelves.
Outrage trembled the notebook in Livia's hand. An outsider in the library was tantamount to desecration, no matter the
course it
authority
is.
commanding it. Their rift with the Mechanicus had saved them from the worst abuse from beyond their walls, but the library had been forever scarred by the last time an Inquisitor had stepped amongst the shelves. Clenched upon her notebook, her fingers had drained of color. She seized upon a thin hope. The others?
There has been no word from within. They are lost. You are the last upon this side of the gate.
Poor
Livia
girl.
looked again to the shrine,
Poor
eyes
girl.
watering from the number of candles. From where she stood, choice seemed a far distant thing, the many threads of duty twisting into a lash that compelled her onwards. She looked upwards to the saints and martyrs painted upon the ceiling. Hanging from the long-dead chandeliers, stalactites of wax formed reproving fingers.
Duty.
She marched towards the gate. I can retrieve the tome. I know where it is.
Yes, she can.
Somewhere
You can do
within,
it.
She tried to find confidence to match her tone.
Oh my god.
May the God Emperor guide your steps. He sends his Inquisition, and we have all
Remember?
but failed them.
The Emperor protects. I'm not really sure what I mean, clearly the Emperor didn't protect the last ones who went in there, but I'm pretty sure the Emperor will protect her. Or at least that's what's going through her mind.
At the gate, the warden hefted a satchel bulging with large candles and held them out to Livia. Taking them, she put her notebook inside, unhooked the holder from her belt, and lit a candle from the warden's proffered flame. Thus armed, she stepped into the library. The first candelabra stood just beyond the gate, a pale ghost towering out of the darkness.
Of course.
Its ironwork had drowned centuries ago beneath the vast cascades of wax that enveloped it, testament to the countless archivists who had set out from here into the sepulchral depths that lay beyond. Livia pulled a candle from her bag, reversed her stylus, and marked her initials at its base. She lit it and scaled the handholds in the wax monolith to secure
Good girl. At least, she will be remembered somehow.
it atop the mound of its
I mean, what's a little bit of vandalism, right?
expired kin. It was a flicker in the darkness to guide her way back, the first of many that would mark her trail. The light revealed only the smallest hint of the Stygian space ahead. The map she had pored over in her office did little to capture the grandeur of the library. Shelves loomed in front of her in serried innumerable ranks, here rising only 2 stories, ladders scaling them. In the distance on either side, the shelves rose higher, spiral staircases accessing balconies which ran their length. The library contained books, journals, correspondence, maps, star charts, manifests, reports, and manuscripts from across all fields. The section on the system's military history alone was vast, filling shelf after groaning shelf. The Great Wing to Livia's right contained duplicates of the Arbites Annals of Law, trial documents and rulings, which were supplemented weekly. To her left, the
course.
wing containing the Administratum archives grew by the hour. In places, the shelves were utterly lost beneath piles of paperwork that had been stacked up in the aisle.
I am honestly impressed with people who actually worked with the archives. So imagine if you had to go to college without Google, if you actually had to do your research without Google, that you actually had to descend into the depths of a library just to do your schoolwork. I am honestly impressed.
Makeshift tunnels burrowing through the teetering acclamations lit by rare and precious lumens. Livia raised her candle high, expanding the circle of light surrounding her fractionally. Darkness crowded tight at every side, her own shadow thrown wild and shifting against the floor, anchoring the false knight of the library to her heels. She plunged
false
into the
knight.
stacks, perturbed
The false night of the library. I remember whatever happened to that friend of mine who got locked out, or who got the lights turned off on him while he was doing his business in the bathroom.
by the still unfamiliar presence of the servo skull at her shoulder, past shelves of dark wood with edges rubbed pale by the brushing passage of countless trailing hands. Her course became a weaving zigzag as she made her way deeper into the library, skirting dead ends and impassable stretches of shelves. Livia came to a sudden halt. A tumble of unused candles spilled across her path, one crushed flat by the weight of a descending foot. She struggled to imagine why an archivist would not pause to pick up the scattered candles, even as she knelt to add them to her own supply.
Fire is dangerous.
She cast about, looking for any clues as to what had happened, but found none. The servo skull circled, descending in front of her. Livia looked up with a jerk. Its presence, which she had ceased to notice as she traversed the shelves, was suddenly ominous once more. Empty sockets level with her eyes, it stopped, nibs skittering out from below its severed jaw with a chatter to scratch out a message upon the parchment trailing beneath it. It began to write, the darting of its many nibs manifesting the words from the Majoris in ink upon the hanging parchment before they withdrew behind its teeth. He is here. He is coming. He has breached the gate. Find the tome and our salvation. lest we burn. The candle she picked up fell from Livia's numb fingers.
He is here. He is coming. Find the tome. Salvation. So the servo skull, or her boss communicating with her that the Inquisitor has arrived. Is that it? Okay.
Tumbled into the darkness as she scrambled to her feet and started to run. She had expected to have days, maybe a week, in which to achieve her task, and not a mere handful of hours. Her mouth turned as dry as the parchment that surrounded her, the panic redolent in the Majoris' words welling up inside her. Her fingers trembled as she rushed to light each candle she left behind as a waymarker. The flames danced, and she feared more than once that she would snuff them out in her haste. She knew she was leaving a trail for her pursuer to follow, but without them to light it, there would be no way back.
Yeah.
The servo skull and its trailing invective dogged her steps, as inescapable as whatever emissary of the Inquisition now pursued her to the tome. Livia's desperate pace stuttered as she saw a light up ahead. Her own candle shivered as she contemplated the thought that she had somehow been overtaken and headed off by the Inquisition's acolyte. She forced herself to keep moving, one cold foot at a time, trusting to the God Emperor to protect her and the works under her charge from whatever fate lay ahead.
I mean, clearly the Emperor would protect her now, like it protected the others that went before her.
Up ahead, she spied a dark figure collapsed beside a dwindling candle. A far cry from the upright and wrathful instrument of the Inquisition she had expected, she instead found a black-robed warden slumped against the shelves, their candle a guttering stub. Livia made a cautious approach, bolder than she might have been had she not at first imagined that something more frightful lay in wait. The marks of the scourge on her back were a reminder of the punishment for breaking the silence of the library, so she said nothing as she crept closer. She was nearly beside them when she realized that she'd made two mistakes. Firstly, that the warden was dead, only the flickering candlelight giving the body the illusion of lifelike motion. Secondly, that they were not a warden at all. Livia studied the fallen figure. As a novice, she had been sent on heaving slogs to drag back the chanced-upon corpses of lost archivists from...
So, oh my god. Dead bodies are a thing in their libraries. Of course, it's grimdark horror. Why wouldn't they be?
Amid the stacks, but never a fresh body. What she'd mistaken for a dark warden's robe...
Harry Potter, Gringotts Bank, where they would, what was the name? Or they would only check if something or someone fell into the trap, like, after a couple of years. Reminds me of that. Yeah.
Was in fact the white of an archivist, but filled so tightly with script that it was stained almost black with ink. Letters and symbols drawn onto the fabric, bearing little resemblance to the high and low Gothic or native dialects which Livia was familiar with. The servo skull hovered in close, its nib skittering once, but writing nothing. Its open pages so heavily suffused with ink that Livia had at first failed to pick it out. A notebook nestled in the archivist's lap.
So whoever, if it's nestled in ink, if there's too much ink, it means whoever was writing it didn't give it a chance to dry. If you guys have ever tried writing with a quill or with a fountain pen, it needs time to dry. And apparently whoever was writing didn't have enough time to wait it out.
Words had exceeded the boundaries of the paper, spilling onto the robes and yet further on. Where the cloth proved insufficient, they had begun to inscribe words upon their own skin, their stylus gouging letters into their flesh. Curlicues of excised tissue hung from the self-inflicted wounds. It was not just ink that stained their robes, but also dried blood. The corpse bled as white as the robe should have been. The stylus was locked in a death grip in their hand, the nib blunted and buckled. They had taken so long at their task that the first words cut into their skin had begun to scab over. Where their flesh stretched thin over bone and tendon, the body's...
So the dude tattooed himself. Alright, got it.
Working could be seen revealed within the deeply carved letters. Livia found herself massaging her forearm, nursing her unbroken flesh in sympathy, even as she leant in closer to read the blood-flecked words in the notebook, the origin of the cascade of ink and madness. She devoured what small fraction of the text she could understand before the script transmuted into an unrecognizable tumult. They were expedition notes, a custom Livia had never practiced, that roughly recorded the archivist's path, clearly continuing from a previous page. The notebook stated, "The new route works nearly as well in practice as in theory. Thank the Emperor. The cages are not far from here. I fear I am lost amid the iron. I move in circles. I cannot find the way forward. There is light ahead that is not my own. I see him. He has the tome. We are saved. Emperor be praised. Why hasn't he returned with it? He breaks the vows. He speaks within these walls. He says my fate is written in the tome, that I must read what will become of me." After that, the unknown script began spilling onwards and outwards. Livia felt compelled to follow the writing, captivated by the task of trying to decipher it, and in doing so, comprehend what had driven the archivist to such lengths. She leant closer yet, contorting herself in place, trying to follow the meandering lines of text. Hot wax spilled from the lip of her candle holder and splashed onto her wrist. She winced at the heat, and with that, the mesmeric allure of the script was broken. Her eyes were tired and dry. Her candle was burnt down far further than it ought to be. She had wasted precious time she could ill afford to lose. Livia looked at the body.
But she's in the right track. She's following the tome.
With regret, and then averted her gaze from the tangled symbols. Mouthing a silent prayer to the Emperor for the dead, she set off deeper into the darkness, pushing away the desire to mourn and the gnawing curiosity the words carved into the corpse's flesh had awakened. Whatever madness had overtaken them had ridden them a long way. Livia thanked the Emperor for whatever twist of fate had put them in her path. She now knew that the tome was where she had expected it to be, within the cages. All else could be dealt with upon its retrieval. Livia just needed to keep ahead of the action.
So, cages may be referring to the restricted area of the archives or the library where some of the books are kept behind a cages or cell. I hope that's what they're referring to, because I have seen cages and cells. I mean, they don't do that anymore. Modern libraries usually have glass walls in order to provide temperature control or moisture control. But before then, I have seen old libraries that provided them in cages or cells in order to keep people from, getting to the restricted area of the library.
Acolyte and offer it up to them. Mercy was not how the Inquisition and its agents rewarded failure. Without some means of bargaining, she had no expectation of surviving an encounter. Retrieving the book might be some token to tip the scales of judgment in the favor of the library. Her eyes on the shelves, Livia felt the ashes crumble beneath her feet before she saw them. Her feet ground crisp, charred pages into fragments with each step as she waded through the drift of ashes that had gathered between the bookshelves. She consoled herself with the knowledge that the damage was irreversible long before this final act of desecration. Her cracked lips mouthed silent prayers. The aisle of shelves ceased abruptly, and the light of Livia's candle was suddenly flung wide. But it failed to illuminate anything more than a fraction of the vast emptiness of the lacuna yawning before her. She leapt back as though on the edge of a precipice, clinging to the end of the last shelf. She hastened to place a fresh candle into the sconce that had been crudely nailed there. The weak flame did nothing to push back the encroaching darkness. Livia gathered her nerve and headed out into the unnatural void, pushing through ankle-deep mounds formed of the blackened and fragile remains of books, stirring up the smell of smoke, occasionally.
So someone tried to burn it all down.
Finding an intact corner or spine with her bare toes. The servo skull scudded low, trailing parchment scuffing the ash. Her progress took her across the epicenter of the destruction. Here, the ash thinned, revealing a vast scorch mark upon the cracked flagstones, stretching dozens of feet across. The last time an Inquisitor had cause to enter the library, they had made a pyre to destroy works they deemed heretical. Shelves had been felled by axe.
Well, it is in the Inquisition after all, so I thought one of the archivists, at least one of the archivists that went before her tried to burn it down because of the tome or because of whatever's lurking inside the library. But apparently it was the Inquisition. Well, the Inquisition is definitely known for that, book burnings and stuff. The Nazis did it. The communists did it. You know what? Every time you're dealing with bad guys, every time they try to burn books. Alright? The moment they try to shut down ideas, it simply means that they're the bad guys. Alright? Because you know what? The real good guys would never try to do something like this.
Chainsword, and 24 archivists had been consigned to the flames atop the books, keeping their vows of silence even as they burned. It was distant centuries ago, but the wound was still fresh, an indelible mark against their emperor-given charge as guardians. Livia could imagine the fierce heat and the smell as paper and flesh alike were consumed. The shelves on the far side of the lacuna were cracked by heat and blackened by soot. Livia scurried for their sheltering confines. The first candelabra was a little way in, the stone of the floor still showing marks where it had been dragged into a fresh position so as to avoid the sacrilege of kindling fresh flame within the lacuna. There were those amongst Livia's colleagues who maintained, somewhere within the uncharted periphery of the library, their own shrine to the lost, commemorating the books in their care that had been destroyed. They placed their candles upon it, but lit not a single one. She looked back at the last candle she had left to mark her path, its tiny flame nearly lost to the distance across the lacuna's expanse, and started as it was momentarily obscured. Someone had passed between her and the flame, someone who held no candle of their own. Her body felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air of the library.
It's someone who knows the library.
Some quirk of the momentary silhouette told her that it was not an archivist, that it could only be the acolyte of the Inquisition who had...
How would an acolyte know its way around the library? I mean, the last book burning was centuries before. This acolyte probably wouldn't know its way around the library.
Caught up with her, standing upon the border of their distant predecessor's atrocity. Livia turned and fled, nearly fumbling her candle in her haste. The precious flame that lit her way flickered, agitated by the swiftness of her passage. Her robe flapped at her ankles, the servo skull tight behind her. She passed 2 candelabra before she dared to stop to mark her way. Shifting from foot to foot, her breath coming in sawing gasps. She had little choice but to light her way back, despite the sure knowledge that it laid a path for her pursuer. She told herself she could keep ahead of the acolyte, and that maybe, if she could retrieve the tome, she could yet appease them. It was a hope as small and flickering as the flame she lit, and it withered when she looked back and saw the figure pass before the previous candelabra. She veered down a row of shelves and took 2 more turns, desperately glancing to either side to find some landmark upon...
I mean, poor girl. If it is the Inquisition, they wouldn't show any mercy, even if she holds it out to them. Nope, they're just going to kill her and say that she has been tainted by chaos or tainted by heresy since she touched the book.
The shelves by which to navigate. Looking back, she saw through a gap in the ranks of books that the acolyte was closing on her. The candle she had left behind had marked her path, but the one she carried was making her easy to track. Livia acted without thought, the strangling grip of present danger overwhelming the long-held taboo, and blew her candle out. The inky darkness snapped closed around her, consuming her utterly. The shelf she clung to, her only anchor in the world. Bereft of sight, she labored to hear the approach of the acolyte, struggling to make out anything beyond the sound of her own hammering heart and the rasp of air from her heaving lungs. The pale shape of the servo skull hovered above her, a mocking phantom of the sun she hadn't seen since the commencement of her administratum service. There was a whisper of a booted foot scuffing stone. Panic set her running once more. Unseeing, she crashed into a shelf, the useless candle and holder torn from her hand to clatter away across the flagstones. Without the candle, growing hunger and the ache in her limbs became Livia's only way of marking time. Progress became measured by the number of shelves she stumbled her way along, tethered to them by an outstretched hand. She nearly broke her silence when her hands encountered iron bars stretched across the shelves.
The cages!
Flakes of rust coming away beneath her
Oh my god, she reached the cages!
fingers. The bars kept the books locked behind them inaccessible to anyone without the correct key. They were a lesser form of the cages that she sought and meant in the vast geography of the library that she was adjacent to her goal. Fingers trailing on rusted iron, she quickened her pace, slowing when she saw a hint of light ahead. The The shelves were so wide apart she couldn't span the aisle with her arms outstretched, and made a broad corner ahead of her, the light emanating from just beyond. Livia came cautiously around the corner, eyes watering at the sudden intensity of the light. Illuminated by candle flame, she saw an archivist kneeling amidst a slew of books that had been scattered across the floor. He ripped the securing bars free to enact this desecration, the mottled ironwork discarded amid the tumble of ancient volumes. As Livia watched, the archivist tore pages from a book and stuffed them into his mouth with both hands, chewing with manic intensity, letting the stripped binding fall atop a mound of others he'd defiled. The sound of it made her hands crawl up the side of her head to shield her ears. Spittle and sodden, macerated fragments of paper spilled from his lips. He didn't stop or seem to pause for breath, but just kept tearing pages free from between covers and forcing them into his grinding jaws, smearing his fingers, lips, and chin with ink.
Maybe he's just hungry? I mean, he's been stuck there for days.
He swallowed, choking the mass down, eyes rolling back. Saliva dribbled down his chin onto his robes, blackened by ink, reddened by the blood leaking from lacerations that scoured the flesh around and inside his mouth. Cheeks distended by the pages he had gorged upon and bearded with effluvia. The man was unrecognizable to Livia. She was unutterably glad of that small mercy. In the fervor to devour more pages, he had dislodged his own teeth with spittle-soaked fingers, forcing them out of the way, uprooting incisors and canines, crunching down on them with the remainder. She risked a cautious step closer, pressing herself against the farthest side of the row of shelves so hard that the cold iron of the retaining bars scraped along her spine. She needed the candle that lit the abhorrent spectacle that the archivist had abandoned so casually, forgetting it upon the edge of a shelf as if it were no value here. The servo skull hovered along in the center of the aisle. It was a distraction that could give her away. She snatched it from the air with both hands, wrestling it close to her, index fingers hooked into its eye sockets. The tips of the nibs stabbed into the fingers she curled under its jaw as she fought the suspensors that kept it aloft. She was nearly level with the archivist when he abruptly stopped, the digits of one hand still lost within his mouth. Upon his other hand, Livia could see the ragged stump of a finger, bitten off in his eagerness to consume more books. Blood oozed sluggishly from torn skin.
I mean, check this
Her
out,
determination.
right? Have you ever done that exercise as a kid where you tried to bite your own finger? Apparently, our brain has this some sort of self-preservation mechanism that it simply wouldn't let us, hurt ourselves, like, bite off our own finger or something. That's why we limit ourselves to it. But apparently, the guy was disturbed enough that it overrode that self-preservation mechanism in our brain that it would, bite off its own finger.
To stand firm, nearly withered in anticipation of a flailing lunge and the rending bite of his ruinous jaw locking down upon the meat of her arm. The archivist convulsed suddenly, the movement making Livia start, almost sending her racing back into the darkness. He doubled over so violently that his head cracked against the floor. He vomited, not the mass of paper that Livia was expecting, but an endless, silky black pool of ink that spread to surge against the books that lay around him. Even racked by continuing spasms, the archivist tried to scoop up the liquid with his maimed hands and force it back down. The growing puddle stained the gray ash of the lacuna that clung to Livia's bare feet, sticky and carrying the disturbing warmth of body heat. Livia released the servo skull and snatched the candle in the holder that the archivist had abandoned. Shielding the precious flame, she fled, the satchel of fresh candles thumping on her thigh. The servo skull straining along behind her, hanging parchments streaming. The looming shapes of candelabra reared out of the dark at her, nearly bringing her to a skidding halt with the thought that she had been caught, or that her flight had brought her circling back to the bibliovore. She dreaded crossing the trail of her own ink-stained feet. The further she fled, the less likely that seemed, the chance of following the shelves to her intended destination in the restricted section growing greater. Her mind filled with the potential routes out of the library, or those that would take her into a far distant part of its depths. She nearly veered from her path, but held her course. She trusted to faith to keep her safe from whatever malignancy had destroyed the other archivists. Flight would only delay the inevitable. Without her
Definitely
intervention,
would.
the Inquisition would surely damn the library with the mark of failure and incompetence, and see the building and all within purged with flame and sword. Futile as it
They would anyway, so what's the point?
might be, she pressed on, feet aching, exhaustion chewing on her bones. She came upon the larger cages suddenly, tumbling out
There we
from
go.
between the shelves and into the restricted section. She sagged against the bars in relief, gathering her scattered composure. The cages were uniform, made of bars set into the stone floor, rearing up over twice Livia's height. Within them, some shelves were stuffed to overflowing with books and curios, while others held but a single volume. The lock upon each cage was finessed with a plate that bore the seal of the last archivist to access it, pressed into pale candle wax, obscured by dust. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her notebook and leafed through its pages, searching for the sketched map she'd made of the layout of this section of the library. The words written in the dead archivist's notebook came back to her. Whatever madness had turned their mind septic had started here. Livia had been able to ignore that thus far, focusing solely on finding the cages. Now that she walked amongst them, she began to fixate on what might lie ahead, tempering conjured nightmares against the presumption that it could be no worse than the wrath of a disappointed Inquisition. She drowned out the voices before they could rise in eternal cacophony, focusing herself upon the words of a hymn of devotion to the Golden Throne. Livia came to a candelabra and reached inside her satchel, pulling out a candle from her dwindling supply. As she pressed the base of the candle into the wax that surmounted the candelabra, she felt warmth beneath her fingers. Her fogged brain took a moment to process its significance. The warmth meant a candle not long dead, that she was following in the wake of another archivist, that perhaps by some twist of fate or design of the Emperor, she had a chance of completing her mission. She glanced frantically about,
You got it, girl.
eyes straining to pick out any sign of another's presence. She caught sight of the next candle just as it stuttered and died, a faltering pinprick in the darkness. She moved towards it as fast as her tired legs would allow, and reached it just in time for her fingers to dip into wax that was still molten. She made out the next candle clearly, reaching it moments before it was snuffed out. The procession of guttering candles led Livia deeper and deeper.
Wait. The trail. I don't think she should be following it. It feels like a trap.
Into the maze of cages. Ahead, she could make out a stronger glow through the iron lattice of the cages. Livia made towards the light, but as she drew closer, she'd realized she'd mistaken its scale. Far closer than it appeared, it wasn't the glow of a candelabra crowned with tapers, but something much larger. She quailed at the thought of a conflagration, but ran forward in the hope of somehow dousing the flames. A figure stood at the periphery of
She's definitely devoted to her job.
the blaze, outline blurred by the light lapping around it. As she began to discern the detail within the glow, she saw that the fire was not one continuous inferno, but that it was made up of innumerable candles, rising in a rearing mass of wax
Like an altar or a prayer corner at church.
to the bars of the cage and around the open door, the sheer volume of them giving the illusion of a monstrous fire. Upon the open door of the cage, she could see red wax running and dripping like blood, a sign that it had been locked under an inquisitorial seal. Shielding her eyes against the searing illumination, Livia saw that the silhouetted figure was that of another archivist. He turned to her, his empty eye sockets filled with darkness deeper than any other within the walls of the library. He held an open book in his hands as though she had interrupted his reading. Livia had no doubt it was the tome she had been searching for. She drew closer, free hand outstretched towards the book, fingers almost brushing the cover. He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. A voice behind her sounded like the booming declaration of an affronted demigod.
In the name of the divine emperor, and by the power of the Holy Inquisition, I name thee heretics and maleficarum. By thine actions, you are condemned to death.
Shut up!
By my actions, you will die.
Livia tumbled backwards, pushed by the archivist's hand on her shoulder. As she fell, two tiny, piercingly bright flashes of light passed over her. The archivist staggered, ember-ringed holes in his robes, framing cauterized gouges drilled into the meat of his chest. Livia struck the floor, her satchel of candles shrugging from her shoulder to spill across the ground. Some bone-deep instinct urged her back to her feet as the acolyte closed on her. Luck alone had kept the candle in her holder aflame and in her hand. The raised blade of the acolyte's sword glowed with reflected light. As Livia scrambled backwards to avoid the descending blow, the servo skull swerved between them. The acolyte's sword caught the skull, shearing it apart, scattering splinters of ancient bone, riven parchment, and a spray of nibs.
We should run now because there's no salvation from this. They're just going to burn down the entire library anyway.
Peppering them both with ink. Livia's retreating heels met the archivist's fallen body, lying amid the candles at the mouth of the cage, and she realized she had nowhere else to run. When Livia lunged, the acolyte's eyes followed the candle in her right hand. She thrust the ink-darkened stylus in her left hand through the back of his wrist. His blade tumbled from deadened fingers to strike the floor with a deafening peal. He snarled in wordless fury, exchanging the las pistol in his other hand with a fistful of her robe, the gun swinging from its chain at his wrist. Despite Livia's stylus still lodged in his arm, he snatched her candle, tearing it from the holder and driving it towards her eye. Unable to get away, her world shrank to the size of the dancing flame. There was the sizzle and stink of burning hair as her eyelashes and eyebrow were singed to nothing. The smell of her own charred skin mixed with the scent of a snuffed candle. Lost in pain, she choked on her own silence. Wax and blood ran down her cheek like tears. Livia flailed, the empty candle holder catching her attacker in the side of the face, its spike driving into yielding meat and rebounding from bone, once, twice, before jerking free of her grip. The acolyte still held onto her, a fist twisted in her robes. Weakened but tenacious yet, Livia tried to force him back, striking him wildly again and again with fists and open hands until something broke beneath her blows, fragments of its cutting edge digging into her palm. The sudden scent of holy oil overwhelmed that of her burnt flesh. She was abruptly released and cast away. Livia caught herself on the bars of the cage door, her attacker glistening in the candlelight, oil soaking him from chest to boots. The broken neck of a glass vial dangling from a cord around his throat. A shard of broken glass wedged into his armor, dripping with his blood. Livia grabbed at one of the hundreds of candles beside her and hurled it, even as the acolyte raised his pistol and fired. The flame of Livia's thrown candle reached out, grasping for a victim.
I don't know if she made the situation worse. A dead acolyte. The Inquisition's definitely coming now.
Acolyte was engulfed as it struck him. He beat fruitlessly at the flames, then turned and ran. A figure wholly wreathed in fire, screaming and throwing wild shadows into the dark as he tore through the aisles between the cages, dripping flame. The acolyte's final shot had struck Livia, but she didn't feel it and could not smell the further immolation of her own flesh. The desire to retrieve the tome and
she's definitely running on adrenaline.
Complete the task she had been set upon animated her for a moment more. With her remaining eye, she regarded the dead archivist. He lay circled by candles, framed by iron and flame. The tome closed on his chest, covering his wounds. Above the corpse, the air twisted, and with a silent tearing, reality unhinged itself. A rift in the fabric of space flexed and shivered. It blossomed in the air.
So he did finish the invocation. And the ritual tore open the gate to the warp, and the Inquisitor was right.
Spilling effulgent light, alive with a wildly shifting marbling of all the colors Livia had ever seen. Candles started to melt in the intensity of the light spilling from the portal, their forms beginning to slump and flow. The wax that had run down Livia's face from her destroyed eye liquefied, dripping to the floor, colored by blood. Bubbles rose in the growing pool of wax as it started to boil on the cold stone, unmoored wicks floating in it, still aflame. The wax sizzled and burned, issuing bitter smoke, and suddenly ignited. At the center of the conflagration, the book remained unharmed. Livia saw the ghost of half-formed things in the dancing flames. The combination of duty and curiosity that had compelled her for so long gripped her one last time. She stepped forward into the flames, untouched by them, and took hold of the tome. Grasping the grimoire to her chest,
Because why not?
she took another step, and the portal shivered forward to consume her.
The Inquisition was right. And that's Halloween, you guys. See you around. Bye!